There we are.
Good. So, your mum inspired you to have a conversation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story. Sorry, so the email I sent you is quite funny actually because it was so there's basically nothing in it in the email I
No.
sent you because I didn't know anything about you or even if that was the right email address when I sent the email. So just for a bit of background, I guess we see my family's pretty heavily into sort of meditation and that kind of side of things. I started meditating when I was about 15. My dad gave me autobiography for yogi at like 15 years old, and he sort of meditates a lot and followed that um, kind of practice for many years when he was younger. My mum had, long kind of one particular experience, in particular when she was about her early 20s of being, I guess you'd say, in the body of bliss for a couple of weeks and just had no idea what it was and sort of chasing that. So I kind of grew up in that environment and started meditating about 15. And then at about 2021, I'd been dropped out of college to pursue art and paint and draw. And I started to get into meditation more heavily. So I did a couple of Vipassana retreats and got pretty heavily into
Mhm.
that. Um, so, kind of that was pretty intense. I was very, looking back, very effort focused. I was like, this requires hard work and effort and discipline. So it was like hours per day of meditating and then like painting and this kind of like very difficult, but also very kind of amazing period of just kind of being
Mhm.
early 20s at my that point, crashing at my mum's and just painting and drawing and meditating all day. That was kind of what I was doing. And then I kind of quit painting for a little bit after a while. I got into a bit of a bad way with it. I started to get a lot of anxiety when I painted out of nowhere, really kind of like intense
Oh.
anxiety. It started to get panic attacks when I painted as well, which is really bizarre. Uh,
Mm.
so I quit that and I sort of stopped meditating and things and um, stopped for a couple of years really. And then around COVID, got back into it and got back into to meditation and was starting to feel really, really great. And just felt kind of a lot of things drop away. I felt like certain things like the idea of having to be a certain type of person or achieve certain things just all kind
Mm.
of went. I remember saying to friends of mine around that time, like, it doesn't really matter to me how the story goes now. I'm content with it
Yeah.
going either way. And I started to just feel very kind of joyful at that time. And I actually injured my sort of right side of my body for quite a while. I had this weird thing, couldn't figure out what it was. So I
Mhm.
couldn't really do much. I couldn't really move for like a good 6 months. And during that time, at first, I was really panicked, like what's going to happen? Will I be able to do anything again? But then quite quickly, I just kind of settled into it and started to feel just like very grateful for everything in life and just really, really at sort of peace with things, I guess you could say. And that was a couple of about 2.5 years ago. And then through my dad's, I kind of from there, I think it's fair to say, sort of fell out of fell out of that for a while and felt just sort of really quite, I would say heavy, but also at peace in a way.
Mm.
There's a lot of like grief and things going on in my body, but I felt sort of very kind of distant from it. I
Mm.
wasn't really sure what was going on because there was sort of a letting go, but also when I wasn't feeling at peace, I would feel like deeply heavy and really terrible.
Mm.
And that went on for sort of a couple of years. And then um, a few sort of months ago, I was just really fed up with, I sort of was feeling one of those ways where I just felt really off. I just got out like a bit of paper and a book. And I just, we've been reading, Mum gave me the book Conversations with God. I'm not really familiar with that. Not religious whatsoever, but he writes to himself.
Yes.
And I was just like, I'm just gonna give that a shot. And I just wrote like, what's going on here? Like, why am I feeling like this? And I got this kind of long response about stuff. I didn't really know if there's any merit to it, but it works. And I instantly felt a lot less anxious.
Good.
So I started to play with that a
Mm.
little bit. Um, and then I was like, I wonder what I can ask and just see what will work. So I started to ask about kind of self-inquiry and what does self-realization mean and all that. And through a sort of sequence, um, it kind of led to the who am I question. And then uh, basically I got the answer that basically was the answer was no thing. It wasn't like nothing. It was no thing in particular, but
Yes.
also everything. There was
Yes.
no thing in particular. And I just felt very kind of peaceful and at ease after that. Lots of things started going crazy, pretty much immediately, girlfriend broke up with me that kind of thought was the one. My friends kind of thought I'd like lost my mind. Everything went really chaotic for a bit,
Mm.
and all over the place. And there was a lot of things coming up like intense anger and stuff that I never really knew I had that was just kind of pulsing through my body. And it all kind of went away. But I was something still felt quite not right. Now that I understand was invitations were kind of saying, well, you can't have got it. That wasn't it,
Yes.
whatever it may be. So I kind of went back in, but not fully. There was something still a bit. I was like, there's something I've seen that can't be unseen, but I wasn't really sure
Yeah.
what was happening. And then one day I showed up at my mum's and she just mentioned your name and that I can't remember what she said, something about I think it was just a line on, before when you're 2 years old, you've not like adopted the personal mode yet and things are
Mm.
effortless. I just said, and you can talk to him. And immediately I just went on my phone, looked you up, sent an email to you. And then instantly after sent that email, I actually just felt like completely, I guess, right into the body of wisdom is what I'd say now. But it's
Right.
completely like that. Went to bed, got up the next day, came back through here, and was just walking around. And I had the interview with you and Vincent
Oh,
on.
yes.
So I
Yes.
was listening to that one, just walking around, and as I was listening to that, just the kind of fear of death came up and just kind of
Mhm.
went. And then you were talking about the distinction between personal and impersonal, and then the idea that it's sort of invitations being sent to you. And then I just was like, oh, I've got it. And I didn't even think I've got it, but I just sort of knew that
The way it works.
that was the way it works. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, and then since then, I sort of spent, I think, about good 2 weeks doing literally nothing. I think it'd be the best way to describe it. I was just kind of getting up in the morning. I would just be like, you know, looking out the window and just kind of completely unmoved to do anything or
Mm.
anything to happen at all, really. And then slowly I sort of started to accept bits of invitations, I guess you could say. And the funny thing was, it was invitations into integration was the thing that I thought I need to like integrate this some way. And then through
Mm.
that, I sort of started to get a bit more entangled again. Then that sort of started to fade off recently. I've just been kind of adjusting, I would say,
Mm.
since
Yeah.
then. So that's a lot to just at the start.
Well, that's really good, actually. Very helpful. And quite interesting that it came through about no thing, because no thing is impersonal being. So,
Yeah.
so did that arise? Was it a kind of automatic writing? Was it like channeling almost?
Yeah, so it was interesting
Mm.
when I was doing it because there's the whole I heard over the years when meditating and things that, um you're how to describe it? I just completely lost my train of thought. I should really say that.
That's okay. So yeah, well, yeah, the way you describe things, especially when there's clarity, then the invitations can accelerate. So because the dualistic realm doesn't want you to actually see the freedom that's available, so
Mm.
it tries to invite you back in. It sounds as though that was going on. How
Yeah.
d- how do you feel you are in terms of the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode, would you say?
I say I feel pretty strong in the distinction. There's certain invitations that tend to lodge a bit deeper than
Mm.
others. Quite a few
Yeah.
tend to bounce off, but some kind of manage to. There's I can still feel that there's a um, association there almost, but it's
Mm.
quite different now, and it feels that there's all the personal stuff is happening within a wider space,
Yes.
and it's sort of seen as happening within that wider space.
Yeah.
Whereas before it felt very much like I was either sort of kind of at peace and kind of resting back, or I was
Hmm.
really claustrophobic and
Hmm.
very, involved and kind of enmeshed in things. And even when there's a lot happening, a lot of thoughts, a lot of invitations, even if there's a lot of unpleasantness sort of happening in the body,
Hmm.
it's still in this wider kind of
Mm.
relaxed space that's just there.
Great. Yeah, that's really good. So, um, well, as you probably realize, our true nature is already fully present. It's just that in the world of content, we're invited into various forms of limitation, and those forms are trying to get us to believe that we're locked in time and space and that we're limited. And there's a kind of incentive to activate the mind and emotions because that's how we're kind of energetically investing in the dualistic realm. And so yeah, it sounds really well. You're very clear considering it's such a short time because it's only been a few weeks, really.
Yeah, so it's been, I think, just about I think it was the 3rd of September. So it's been over a month. I think I've been really lucky, so I've not had basically any work to do. So I've
Yes.
been basically I've worked probably 5, 6 days in that time. So I've been able
Yes.
to really just kind of spend a lot of time really sitting and relaxing into. There was one where I got really, sort of the past week, I got really knocked out off it completely, which was quite interesting. So I was with some friends, and they tend to smoke quite a lot of weeds. I don't usually at all. But I always just think the curiosity is like, I'm gonna see how this mixes in. That was a terrible idea. So a lot of really kind of intense anxiety that lasted for, like a week. It was kind of there. First few days there was a lot there. Whereas for me, when I had done stuff like that in the past, it was sort of, maybe I might have an off experience here or there, but it was gone, within a few hours, an hour kind of thing. This was for like a week afterwards. It was really kind of there, this sort of intense, I'd say, social anxiety for the first couple of days, and then like a background just with certain things that would really, really
Yeah.
come up. Like, for example, a friend of mine, stag do, he sent an invite on like the WhatsApp, and I was going to send like a gift back, and instantly I just kind of got this really intense feeling off anxiety, which was just really bizarre to me. And on the run up to chatting to as well, there was quite a lot of just days where I felt very tired and very kind of like, just like I was kind of getting knocked over. But also, again, that was sort of happening in kind of a wider, relaxed,
Yes.
peaceful space.
Yeah. It's interesting with weed because sometimes it can just open consciousness up and it can bring some really favorable experiences. But for you, it seems as though you're just, well, certainly temporarily being guided away from it because
Mhm.
the it can also accelerate things like anxiety, as you know,
Yeah,
anxiety, paranoia, those kind of things. And so it's just kind of guiding you at the moment to steer clear of it, probably.
yeah, yeah, which I'm more than happy with. But it was very bizarre
Yes.
to have that.
Yeah. Well,
There was also, sorry.
sorry, Marcus. No, because the dualistic realm is an inversion, um, when there's clarity coming in and then the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode is clear, then quite often the invitations also become inverted. And
Mm,
so there could be experiences which previously were okay and you managed them and they were fine, but they can take on a different context sometimes. But
yeah.
it's usually they do give you an insight into what they're trying to um, well, the invitations are usually the opposite of what the potential is really.
It's interesting that you say that, because yesterday, so what happened sort of last night, and I had this during the first 2 weeks, I'd say I had a very similar
Mm.
um experience this, which I was just sitting down, and it became really apparent that the same the same infinite being that looks through my eyes is looking through everyone else's eyes.
Yes.
Whereas before it seemed more as if I was the space and everything else was existing in the space, but there still seemed like there was a bit of a division there, I
Yeah.
would say. But
Yes.
then yesterday it felt really like, oh, it's literally the same being looking through everyone else's eyes, and therefore
Yes.
there is no division there. And then also the anxiety went away
Mm.
very quickly then as well, because it was like, where's there's not really a possibility for anxiety because if you're just the one,
There's
there's
fear is born of duality, isn't it? So
yeah,
if there's only singularity, then there can't be any fear.
yeah.
That's really good. So do you feel you can experience unity consciousness, which is really just the way so when we drop the idea of being a separate individual, there is still awareness of the body mind, there's awareness of the thoughts, the emotions or sensations, and then there are the other forms. So there are the forms in the room, there's the
Mm,
light through the window. But all those forms, they're just like waves which are appearing on this infinite ocean of awareness which you've always been.
mhm.
So really the personalization is turned off, and there is just this sense of this single ocean or field within which all forms appear, including the body mind. But if you look directly, and if the subject object mode is off, you can just see that whatever the forms are, there's awareness of the objects in the room, there's awareness of the computer screen, and there's awareness of the body mind sitting on the seat.
Yeah.
And it's everything is really known equally in terms of your infinite nature. It's only that we've been conditioned into believing that we're the body mind. So that conditioning makes it appear as though individuality is sort of more of who we are and everything else is less.
Yes, I've definitely experienced a lot of that. Things like the one thing in particular I would say is, and especially when I'm lying in bed at night, the body doesn't feel like it's a fixed thing anymore. It's more, oh, this is like a mass of sensations
Yes,
and things that are moving about, but it's not. There was kind of an idea before, which I didn't even realize was there, that it was like a solid
yes,
thing that I was kind of inhabiting versus just this
yeah,
mass of things that isn't even stable
yes.
or kind of real in a sense. I don't know how to describe it,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
one
that's
thing,
good.
yeah, thing things feel very kind of unreal would be
Hmm.
the I don't really know how else to describe it than that.
Yes,
It's like you can sort of see through. I really like the one description I heard over the years of far too much listening and meditating. I think was the whole idea of the mirage in the desert.
hmm.
Um, that like is very convincing as a mirage, but then once you see through it, you just see that it's sand, and you can still see the mirage. It's still clear there, but once you know
Yes,
the substance of it, then it's kind of you can't really there's the
yes.
unreality is clear.
Well, really, that's a good description of the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode, because impersonal being is seen to be always there, but then the personal mode is an option, and the degree to which we experience that and entertain it and invest in it is something which is optional. So, you know, when you meet with friends, then you can step more into the personal mode. But your intuition's guided you in recent weeks really to be alone more and to just rest as impersonal being. And then it becomes easier just to be able to maintain impersonal being more,
Mm,
you know, in different circumstances.
yeah. There's definitely some stuff around, I think. I guess it's invitations into a kind of lack of trust would be the way I describe it. It's sort of the mind coming in and saying, "Do you know, well, you can't sit around like this. What's going to happen? This is like going
Yeah.
very against." And I think
Yes.
especially I was very on the path of kind of high effort was
Mm,
it was to me, this
mm,
was meditation stuff. If you had to do it through kind of like blood, sweat, and tears was my
mm.
kind of, I was kind of like, if I'm going to get it, I'm going to just go and put all the
Yes.
effort in and all the dedication in to
Yeah.
do it. So the whole effortless bit is inviting a
Yes.
lot of invitations in.
Yeah. Well, really, the way it changes is that um, the conditioning we've all undergone really is that we've been conditioned into mind predominance. So it's the idea that the mind has the answers, and So in the dualistic realm, most things are based on effort. So it's, the education system, the idea of achieving things in time, having goals, being committed. And so we tend to do that. So most people are committed in a worldly sense in that way, where it's all about effort. And then there's a point where it can switch over to effort in a spiritual sense.
Mhm.
But it's still effort. So it's still actually there's still the seeking aspect, and there's still the element of individuality. But the way effort is being is integrated really is through intuition. And what you'll find is that the, uh, there are certain considerations. Obviously, just maintaining the human experience requires some food and shelter and those kind of things. And but it's quite different to the way we're conditioned, because most people are conditioned to be full on in the dualistic realm. So many people are working really hard, hoping it's going to liberate them from suffering at some time in the future. But actually, when we realize that effort is the source of all creativity and of heightened experience as well, then we kind of reconfigure the the human experience. Because if you prioritize a sense of balance in your daily life, so really only doing what you need to do to maintain your life experience. Because if we can if we can just generate a certain amount of income, so we're not financially stressed, and we're not getting invitations into limitation, we can just have whatever that commitment would be. It might be, say, 20% of the working week. You might need to work part time,
Yeah.
but the where the integration takes place is in the time that becomes available. So if there can be a commitment to maintaining stability on the human level, but not overexertion, just whatever needs to be
Mm.
done to maintain that, but then creating some space where you can be in alignment with your infinite nature. Because the way infinite intelligence comes in, it'll come in effortlessly. And because you've worked as an artist, and that's something which has really inspired you, um, all creativity is coming through the body of wisdom. So you've been practicing functioning from the body of wisdom all the time you've been painting and drawing, really.
Mm.
And so that's something which is already there. So there is already alignment with the body of wisdom. And it's just that the approach you have in terms of creating art, which is you're looking to create it in the most inspired way. Um, the same really applies to your life experience. Because
Mm.
if you create some stability financially, but then you have time available for it just to be really light and joyful, and quite playful, so there's a sense of it being quite easy, then it's in that space really that things come to you,
Mm.
and there'll be a form of guidance. So it could be in terms of creativity. So it could be that there's more inspiration in terms of art, or it could be that other things come in as well. But that's just that sense of ease and lightness, and making every day as joyful as possible,
Mm.
rather than turning it into a form of enslavement. Then
Yeah.
what you find is you're creating a frequency, because the whole of the human experience is a frequency-based game. And so the more we can create a frequency of ease and lightness and effortlessness, then things will come to you effortlessly. And and your life can really open up. And also there's integration, there's more integration, excuse me, of impersonal being into the personal mode because effortless being is the foundation, and then the personal mode generally is in terms of effort and various forms of invitations and limitation. But quite a simple approach is in the distinction between expansion and contraction, because
Mhm.
uh, expansion is something which always comes from the body of wisdom, and contraction always comes from the dualistic realm. So you know the source of the invitations. So the more you align with that sense of expansion, then you know that you're actually aligning with your infinite nature. And the intelligence which will guide you is a benign intelligence, whereas the dualistic realm is like an energy game. It's like an energy matrix. And the more we're involved in that, the more we're investing energy in limitation and contraction.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And one thing that sort of became clear looking back, and even I would say still now, as I've been getting a lot of inspiration. Well, I wouldn't say a lot. I've been mostly sitting around doing not much, which has been great. But on the times I have been inspired to paint, um, the one thing I've noticed is like the inspiration will come, and then almost an equal force, an invitation to not do it will
Yes.
come. So it
Yeah.
will be, and there'll be all this kind of this story about it'll just be the mind throwing things that, not good enough to do it, like it's not going to work, whatever. Basically, trying feels like invites me to stay away from
Yes.
that. And I've noticed that that sort of happens. I think since I really sort of started doing art, that was kind of became there quite heavily from the beginning, where it was sort of like this equal, almost equal art would usually
Yeah.
win, but kind of it felt like it was brute forcing it quite a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah. Have you have you had any formal training in art, or have you are you mainly self-taught? And which course were you doing when you dropped out?
So I was studying a graphic design course, not for very long, for like
Mm.
a month or so.
Yeah.
And so I dropped out to being self-taught. I wanted to originally do concept art for sort of video games and
Mm.
movies. And then I found, mainly because I realized that the people who did that could draw and paint, and I didn't really
Mm.
know anywhere. A lot of the universities were teaching abstract. So
Yes.
I wasn't really sure how to learn more traditional painting methods.
Yeah.
I started looking at that and then found a school that taught entertainment art
Mm.
and sort of traditional painting. And I was like, oh, the painting's what I want to do. So they
Yes.
were had an online course. So I did that for a couple of years, went over there for 3 months here in California. It's like an old school, like atelier style where it's like, 16 people
Mm.
model and you're drawing and painting all day. So I did that for 3 months and then again back into sort of self-taught. A lot of it has been very quite solitary. There was quite long
Mm.
periods of time which is sort of me and you know there'd be a video up or something, but a lot of time just me and the paints and
Mm.
the pads and just working it out really. So there's a lot of it dawned on me recently how much time I actually sort of often chose the solitary path.
Yes. Yes. Well, the reason I asked the question is because with formal art training, it tends to be that we start those courses feeling quite spontaneous, and just things just work through without much effort. But then the structures that are imposed through doing those courses can create quite a lot of inhibition. And
Mhm.
it's the idea, it's like having your tutor on your shoulder and he's sort of monitoring everything that you do. And that can restrict the flow of what you're trying to achieve. And it takes a little while to become free of that.
Yeah, that was definitely felt. The school I went to was very they were very, I would say, focused on the skills development side of things, the
Mm.
technical, the
Yeah.
crafts side, if you like, but not
Yes.
so much on the creativity, bringing it to life. Very
Yeah.
much on like, here's how you draw in proportion, here's how light
Yes.
and color and all of that works. And it was quite, you know, intense in that way, I would say. And something about it didn't quite gel with me. It was one of those things where, the owner of the school was an incredibly skilled, like masterful artist, but he would sort of look at a painting and he'd start to the first thing he'd do is analyze the technique and be like,
Mm,
oh, that ear is not very good, so it's not that good a painting kind of thing. Whereas
mm,
that wasn't the way I
mm.
digested art. To me, it was much
Yeah.
more actually looking back, kind of the being put into the body of wisdom when looking at art was the bit that
Mm,
resonated with me.
yeah. And well, that's it's good you recognize that because it is certainly more important to work in a way where there's spontaneity
Mhm.
and do it on your own terms, really, because um, anything that where we're filtering through someone else's concepts is going to be limiting. And that's so really that you could say the feelings you have, that there's a sense of contraction, but it's because it's coming from the mental realm, because the kind of structuring in painting in a traditional sense, it's obviously good to be able to paint in a traditional way, but the ability to do that is something which needs to have a sense of ease,
Mm.
um, rather than it being critical and the idea of right and wrong.
Yeah.
And because I would say that's the main reason for any kind of blockages to in the creativity. And I remember when there was self-realization in 2005, I was painting at that time, and the the way it was before then, because of all the conditioning and the tuition, is that there'd be an idea to create something, and then um, I'd achieve pretty well what I was aiming to do, but the mind would always come in and say, "Well, why didn't you do it in this way? Or what, you should have done it, or this isn't quite right." So it's this sort of critic on your shoulder.
Yeah.
But since realization, what's happened is that's fallen off. So there's the clarity in terms of executing whatever the piece is, and then that's achieved, and then just moving on to the next one.
Mm.
We learn things, obviously, but it's that sort of criticism and the sense of dissatisfaction which the mind's trying to throw in, which takes the joy out of the experience. But what you find is the um, the things just come fairly spontaneously. So I I trained as an artist, and I worked in a very traditional way, really figurative painting.
Mm.
And my brother's also an artist, so we worked together for a while. And what came really after realization is quite a spontaneous sequence of events, which it just kind of happened without us trying, really. Which is that we started painting together, and then we received an offer of sponsorship
Mm.
from it was from LG Electronics. They make TVs
Yeah.
and um, and so they at the time they wanted to raise their profile, and things like TV advertising, is very expensive, but they sponsored us to paint some portraits of some quite well-known people, and they were able to use their PR department to get editorial.
Oh,
So
wow.
we were getting the sponsorship. We were getting to keep the pieces of work, but they were getting the editorial, so they were getting the right kind of
Mm.
exposure because they were trying to um, attract a certain profile of the population. People interested in art and sport.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's an example of the way things can just happen, uh, where it's but what you realize is that the invitations we've received and the education system really, because all of the main structures in the dualistic realm they're actually part of this energy system. So they're part of the matrix. And so art education, it's the idea that it's teaching you how to paint, but it's actually also maybe up to 50% keeping you in a sense of contraction. So there's the spontaneity which is coming from your infinite nature through the body of
Mm.
wisdom. And then there can be 50% contraction coming through from the dualistic realm, through
Yeah.
the mind of the emotions, which is actually compromising our creativity by 50%. But when you realize that that's how it works, it's much easier to withdraw the investment from the dualistic realm because any sense of contraction, you don't need to entertain it. And then you find that your energy is completely aligned with the body of wisdom, and it's just much more joyful and more expansive and more progressive as well because it develops on its own. But the energy which we were previously investing in the dualistic realm um, comes into alignment with our infinite nature, and then it really accelerates from there.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you were saying about just the way everything with LG and things came about, because that to me is, it's something that you would never even think of LG as being even in that sphere of, kind of
Mm.
art. Or so it's just, I think, a really, and from talking to, I think you chat to my mum next week actually, so I'm sure if
Yes,
I ask her, she's got a good story about a castle and the effortless being. I'm sure
great,
she might share with you. It's a great story that she told me many times
fantastic.
growing up. But one of the things that I kind of noticed as well, which is quite definitely reducing a lot, but one thing that I think kept me in the stuck in the personal mode for a long time was when I could sort of had been meditating for a certain amount of time and could sort of get a lot of experiences and
Mm.
long periods of silence and that kind of thing. And I was under the illusion that it all was going to one day become just one unbroken
Yes,
long period. And it was interesting because it seemed to be working because the silences were getting
yes,
longer and longer and longer. So I was like, oh, I'm really getting somewhere. And there's this idea of the person
yeah,
going and like getting there. Um, but during that time when I would fall out of those periods of silence, there would almost be putting in effort to try and go back to being
mm,
effortless. It'd be
yes,
like an invitation would come to be like, oh, I need to. There'd be kind of an effort to try and have a kind of standoff with it, being the only way I
yes,
describe it. And you're just like
exactly.
in this. It's weird because it didn't feel like full investment into the personal in some way. There was still some sort of a distance there. It wasn't completely like taken away with the
Yeah.
the invitations, but it was also this kind of standstill
Mm,
where everything was a bit kind of locked. And I feel like I still get back into that sometimes, that kind of
mm,
just invitations will come in. I won't fully get carried away with them. I won't fully follow them, but it will just be kind of there and just the kind of slight effort to try and get rid of it kind of thing is a bit
yes,
strange.
yeah. Well, it's quite interesting. What I'd like to do, if we could, Marcus, is just
Yeah.
go through quite a simple sequence just to see where you are,
Hmm.
and then just have a look at um, those aspects because there's a way to be able to remain in alignment with the body of wisdom, which is more effective in one way than where there's no effort required because the dualistic realm tends to like it if we're kind of swinging between effort and effortlessness. I had a similar experience years ago. I used to practice transcendental meditation, and they had a community in Lancashire, and I live in Shropshire, and so I would travel to Lancashire and spend quite a bit of time there, and having the most amazing experiences. But then there was always the pullback, because there's the worldly aspect you have to deal with.
Mm.
And so it created quite a dualistic thing because, well, similar to your experiences, where you're having great experiences of silence and stillness, and then you're drawn back into the world. So I was driving up and down the M6, doing so many miles between between effort and effortlessness. But the solution really is that when we know that our true nature isn't an experience,
Mhm.
then the that dualistic aspect just falls away,
Mhm.
and there's a sense of ease and lightness that where we're not pursuing experiences to the same degree. It's more to do with creating a sense of evenness. And what actually happened, the solution to that situation that I had is I actually had a property in Shropshire which I needed to finish renovating. I'd left it several years before. Um, and what actually happened, the approach I took was the opposite of the way my conditioning was. So the conditioning was you work really hard, get a job or work really hard and then do the work on the house in the evenings and weekends and then get it done in that way, which was based on a huge amount of effort, exertion. And it was very fear-based, really.
Yeah.
But when I came back from the meditation community, I decided not to do that. I decided to prioritize a sense of well-being and enjoyment and lightness in every day. So I didn't really have any money to begin with, and this house had, I think there were about 30 rooms, so
Okay.
it needed, it needed decorating. I managed to. It's because the recession in the 90s was very extreme, so I'd managed to do all the structural work, so the
Mhm.
roof and the walls, the floors, foundations, everything structural was sound. Um, and the electrics and the plumbing, the first fix had gone in, so all the wiring and all the pipe work, but the bathrooms, the kitchen, and all the final finishing hadn't been done. So I got back from being in the meditation community with no money, thinking, how am I going to sort this one out? And but but what I and we actually tried to sell it in 1999 when I came back, but it wouldn't sell because it just needed so much work doing. But I took the decision just to work on it in a really balanced way. So rather than turning it into a real chore, I made the enjoyment of every day the priority. So I I'd work maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, but that would be it. So I'd I'd do some meditation in the morning, maybe an hour or so,
Mhm.
take my dog for a walk, um, come back and have a cup of tea or something, and then work for maybe 4 or 5 hours. Never work to exhaustion, just make it so that even the 4 or 5 hours were done in a really balanced and enjoyable
Mhm.
way. And so initially I could only I was claiming benefits for a while, and yeah, so I could only afford a tin of paint or something. But
Right.
I was able to get all the rooms looking really nice. Um, and I didn't know how I'd get the capital just to finish it off, but that actually came at the end. And it was really the priority of just making every day as light and joyful as possible. So my friend used to come round and we just have a lot of fun really,
Yeah.
and finish work in the afternoon, maybe um, meet up with friends or have a meal or just do things in a really nice way. Um, and so I did that for 18 months. And it was just 18 months where every day felt as though it was exactly the way I wanted it to be.
Mhm.
And I'd never done that before. It was always before that it was my business, so it was like commitment to the business, hard work, and
Yeah.
all the conventional things. And then with meditation, living in the community, it was also commitment to meditation, the practice, and effort.
Mhm.
But this way was the change, where it was a change into a sense of effortlessness and of enjoyment, and realizing that because life is a frequency-based experience, we can define it on our own terms. And What actually happened is that I managed to complete the house after 18 months, and I had it valued to sell it, and it had actually doubled in value in the 18 months,
Perfect.
partly because of the work I'd done, but also because of the market being more buoyant. But that was a real indicator that prioritizing the sense of ease and joy and lightness in every day, being attentive to the way we feel, is the priority. Because if we maintain that, then the experiences we have are just much more buoyant and life's much more benign
Mm,
because we're actually in alignment with effortless being. And so I sold that house in 2003, and I've lived like that ever since. So it's just that sense of it's really a sense of self-respect and and not turning life into a chore.
yeah.
Everything that the world tells us and the government tells us is to keep us enslaved, really.
Mm,
But the challenge is to return to sovereignty. So sovereignty is really when well, actually, sovereignty exists in impersonal being, but it has an impact on the personal realm because when we recognize that we can um, function on our own terms intuitively rather than adopting all of the sort of consensus reality values, then an intelligence comes in which guides us and gives us a completely different experience and reveals, what our life purpose is really.
mm,
So that's it's something to begin to integrate into your life experience, but not in a forced way. So um, it's important. The main thing is to create a level of balance initially, so that you have time. As I mentioned, I did it through claiming government benefits, and so I was able just to work on my house, and um, it was easier then than now. I think there's more pressure really.
mm,
But whatever you need to do, these days I would probably work part-time, do something which was quite an easy job, something that would be where where you're able to generate enough income just to be comfortable and not be financially concerned. And then all the other time you have is where you're establishing the functioning from impersonal, effortless being.
mm,
And what happens is that aspect of your life um, becomes really established, and then it integrates the area where there was effort, and then you find things come in which are beneficial, so that it all becomes it's all being sort of administered from our infinite nature without us even having to think about it.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because after the sort of back and forth, the writing that I was doing, one kind of series of decisions came quite quickly after that. And one of them was basically so this flat which I'm in, I'm moving out of here next week. The decision to move out of that came. I've been living with two other artists for a few years now. I just sort of became clear that we were on sort of different modes, if you like, of just doing
Yeah,
things. I wanted to sort of separate myself from that a little bit. Um, and I also decided that I wanted to kind of just basically have some time out, essentially. So I'm actually, rather than just going to a new place, I'm actually going back home with my mum and my younger brother for a few months over Christmas to just
yeah, that
basically,
sounds perfect. Yeah,
yeah, just kind of reset and then look to kind of move back through sort of
yes.
January time, just have that kind of complete um
That's
downtime,
this
really.
being really, isn't it? Because yeah, it's having that, it's just creating that sense of ease and not being under pressure and just the simplicity. And
Mm.
then just allow that to take whatever time it needs to. But that if you have that opportunity, that just sounds perfect.
Yeah, it's lined up really nice, and I found it very funny as well. So, because I've made some money over painting over the years, but it's never been my full time gig. And right before my dad died, I actually had the savings to go and pursue it full time and built up a client base. So it was literally, ready to go. And I worked with my dad in his business. It was me and him. And then he died. So I ended up taking over the business to for the family's sake. So that obviously meant the art got put on hold for a couple of
Yes.
years, which for me was very devastating at the time, having spent about 9 years building to that point. It was very devastated by that. And then had basically the space open up to pursue art full time again and do that. And then this happened. The first thing I decided to do was not do anything, which I find really funny. So I've been doing
Yeah.
bits and pieces, but there was sort of a plan to,
Mm.
go the effort route, high effort, work really hard, get, a body of
Good.
work done in prints and everything, and have done a few paintings and
Mm.
hung out and not really done much. And I feel, and it's been great. It's been very
Yeah.
funny to have had that something that was so kind of, I feel, central to the who I thought I was just kind of fall away and not be worried or
Yeah.
it be a thing. It's very strange and lovely too.
Yeah. Well, really to have that sense of freedom and not be driven is a great space to be in because that's when the highest form of inspiration comes in, really, where there's just that sense of ease.
Mm.
And yeah, it'd be interesting to see where it goes. But the yeah, let's just have a look at one or two things though, Marcus,
Yeah,
just to see because I'd just like to check out to see exactly where you are, and then we can see if there's anything we need to help you with.
right.
But so you've probably seen some of the exercises that I do. How many of the conversations have you seen on my channel, would you say? You've seen the one of Vincent?
Seen one of the events and I've seen a bunch. It's very funny. So my mum, regular every day will send me, "Have you seen this one?" Link. So she's been going back and forth. I've seen quite a few. I would say I watched quite a few right at the start, and then I didn't really watch any for ages. And then the last week where I had the anxiety, I started to watch quite a few again. Um, so I've seen quite a few, but oftentimes a bit in the background over the past
Yes,
past sort of week.
sure. So have you listened to any? Well, the one of Vincent is where he realizes true nature. Have you listened to any of the others where people realize their true nature during the conversation?
Yes, I'm trying to think who here. So there was um
There's Rika Markle,
Rick
Deborah, Sunny, um,
Is it Kill
Kylie Ann.
Kellyanne, yeah. I saw hers and there was somebody else. I can't remember his name, but he talked about playing tennis with the mind, the back and forth. And he
Oh,
was so him as well. I remember
yeah,
seeing his when he realized his true nature. Yeah.
yeah, good. Um, yeah, that's good. So, yeah, let's just have a little look though. So in terms of effortless being, then, so you're pretty clear on the way forms arise equally and effortlessly. So we were conditioned, really from birth into identification with the body, mind, with the thoughts, and with the emotions. But if we just look in any moment, what we see is that there are just forms appearing equally and effortlessly. So in this moment, could you just mention a few forms that there is awareness of?
Okay, so I've got the sort of light beside me. There's a paint palette on the desk here. Got an easel to my left. There's a big sort of wall hanging. I've got the computer screen in
Mhm.
front of me. There's a little laptop here. There's the chair I'm sitting on. I've got a
Okay.
window on my left.
Yeah, that's good. So a way to actually turn off the personal mode and to just stabilize impersonal being is to use impersonal language. So if we take any of the objects you mentioned, so the palette, so um, in India they say to be free of well, to be self-realized is to be free of the sense of I, me, or mine,
Mhm.
because the truth is everyone remains as the impersonal being. We can't be anything other than that. It's just the conditioning is into using language which gives the appearance of individuality when it never actually happened.
Yeah.
And so if we just look at, say, the objects in the room, the personal mode would be, oh, I can see my palette and there's a wall hanging over there, and I can see the easel and I can see the objects. Um, but when we're using those words, it reinforces the idea that it's Marcus who is having the experience.
Yeah.
But when we use impersonal language, it actually stabilizes the clarity that all along it is actually impersonal being.
Mhm.
So if we, we could say there is effortless impersonal awareness of the palette.
Mhm.
There's effortless impersonal awareness of the computer screen.
Yeah.
There's effortless impersonal awareness of the body sitting on the seat.
Mhm.
Effortless impersonal awareness of any thoughts or any emotions.
Mhm.
And when you see that distinction and you realize it's available, then you can actually turn off personalization. And because impersonal being is effortless being.
Mhm.
So when we're just effortlessly aware of the forms appearing, it's the most economical way to function energetically because it takes effort to maintain a sense of individuality because we engage the mind and it's creating the idea that you really are Marcus existing in time and space, when all along you've just remained as impersonal, effortless being, and just gaining the clarity to be able to make that distinction. Um, it enables you to regulate the degree of investment in the personal realm on your terms, because the dualistic realm is trying to get us to invest in the dualistic realm without us realizing that that's what we're doing. So we're receiving invitations into, you know, mental and emotional turbulence, fluctuating emotions, um, and that all requires an investment of energy.
Mhm.
But when we realize that that's optional, then we can begin to regulate the degree of investment in the dualistic realm, and the energy we reclaim from the dualistic realm aligns with our infinite nature, so that the potential we have in terms of infinite potential just becomes much greater.
Mhm.
So it's good that the really nice thing with you, Marcus, is you've had even though um, the approach I have has only appeared relatively recently, because you're a long-term meditator, your mum and dad have been interested for a long time. You were reading autobiography of a yogi and these things when you were, very young. Um, so the familiarity with impersonal being, because the silence, you could say the silence we experience in meditation is the experience of impersonal being, you could say.
Mhm.
But impersonal being, in essence, has no qualities of its own. It's simply the space, excuse me, the space within which experiences arise. But because the clarity is already there, because you know the experiences, you've probably been experiencing as a field of awareness for a long time. So because if you've been meditating, you can, the silence, the have you had experiences of expansion beyond the boundaries of the body, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I've had quite a lot of them. The first time I really had that was during the first Vipassana retreat.
Hmm.
It's one of the days there where you had to sort of sit, and they called them sittings of strong determination, where you just weren't allowed to move,
Yeah.
which I was in excruciating pain for. But on
Yeah.
one of them, I had that really really clear. That was the first time
Hmm.
I felt it. Um, or even that's a weird way to phrase it. But
Yeah, it's just habit. It's fine.
yeah, but it's funny all of those experiences because they do make you feel like you're getting somewhere, and I suppose in some sense you are, um, only to come back and find out that you never went anywhere in the first place. It's a bit strange.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because in a dualistic sense, we're having experiences. So we meditate and we have those deep experiences. Um, and so we realize there's something which is way beyond the normal human level.
Mm,
But then we have to go back to the human level. And then there's a process of integration, really, which is where when we when we realize that effortless being is always there, then we tend to the incentive to be pursuing experiences tends to dissolve because we see that you are already the open space of infinite effortless
mm,
being. You can't be anything other than that. And I think the things you were saying at the start of the conversation, which is the motivation to try to make things look a particular way, has fallen away.
yeah.
And that's really because you're seeing that your infinite nature is always present. So the content doesn't matter so much then.
Mm,
It can be going out, with your mates, or it can be painting, or it could be meditating. But the sort of grading of experiences which the dualistic realm encourages tends to fall away. So you're not so bothered whether you're doing the washing up or whether you're having a walk or just whatever's going on is absolutely fine because it's the simplicity of effortless being, and all of those things can be enjoyed really.
yeah.
And so, so that's really the process. And I think you'll notice that um, the pursuit for any experiences is already falling away. And the paradox, though, is that when we stop seeking deeper experiences, they tend to come, and there's a sort of deepening which takes place. And you find that the experiences you wish to have become more consciously available. So it's like consciously utilizing the koshas. So most people, because of the mind programming and conditioning, most people have been conditioned into the mental body.
Mm,
So if we take the education system, really starting well from childhood, but through the early school years, and then it becomes more intense through the teenage years. And then if we go to university and do any kind of higher education, that's a sort of deeper embedding of the conceptual realm and of mind predominance. But
mm,
but what's happened for you is that because of the meditation and the clarity which has come through, there's the ability to rest as effortless being because you know exactly what that is. And so um, the the chasing of experiences tends to fall away. But paradoxically, the opportunity to experience in a conscious way is something which is more available to you. So the option to experience either well, experience as the impersonal being or in the personal mode is there's the option to regulate that on your terms.
mm,
And you find the experiences which come through the the infinite being, the intelligence of the infinite being has been kind of waiting on the sidelines while we've been engaged in the dualistic realm. And it says, okay, if you want to go there, that's okay. But as we withdraw our attention from the dualistic realm, then you find that automatically the infinite being is guiding you. And if you look back over your life events, you'll see really that that's what's been going on. even the more dramatic experiences like losing your dad, in the bigger picture, there is a sequence which has been unfolding. In one way, those kind of experiences are a sort of a last-ditch attempt by the dualistic realm to try to draw you back into personalization,
Mhm.
but that was never going to work. Um, and so there's really been an acceleration. And you see that when we discover that effortless being is available and it will take care of things, you'll see that the experiences you've had, the sequence has been just as they should have been, really.
Mhm.
And as things unfold, it's knowing that things are happening just as they should. The example of your life circumstances is a really good example because the clarity and the integration of impersonal being into the personal mode, the space to be able to do that in the most comfortable, enjoyable, and wholehearted way has been presented to you in
Yeah.
the opportunity of being able to go home and move in with with your family.
Yeah. It's odd that you say that 'cause it is something that I've really been feeling over the past month and a half is just kind of looking back and feeling that sense of not, I can't really put it into words, but just feeling like that happened as it should have. And even with things that, the mind would say really shouldn't have been that way,
Mhm.
like my dad's death and things like that, did sort of feel like there was a kind of perfection to it at the same
Mm.
time, which I don't really know how to describe.
Mm.
But it all feels like it did happen, exactly as it
Yes.
should have.
Yeah.
And there's a big sort of this, I guess, it's like exhale from just it all feels very much like at rest. Whereas
Yes.
before, and particularly with my dad and things like that, there was quite a lot of just um grief and things there and questioning and things like that that would come up
Mm.
and just now it all just feels very kind of like put to bed in a way. It just there's no,
Yeah.
it's just really they used to, it's almost like there was no content there in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, everyone remains as the infinite impersonal being,
Mm.
and there can be a character animated in certain life experiences, but the truth is you've remained as the infinite being, your dad's remained as the infinite
Yeah.
being. There are the characters which show up on the stage, but the actor is always the infinite being.
Yeah.
So the character is a fiction, really.
Hmm. And it's this one that's just been, so I'd say literally the past 24 hours. But the one thing my mum has been talking to me about is she's was saying, well, what's the kind of deal with this personal realm and there's so much struggle and so much
Hmm.
difficulty there, and like it's almost as like some sort of a sick joke kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but as you're saying, when you do see that it is just the one impersonal being that's looking through everybody,
Yes.
isn't a there is no loss. There is no,
No.
it's not actually happening. It's, if you one hand of yours touches the other hand, you're not,
Hmm.
any story you have is just a story. It's not, there's no harm done. It's just there's nothing.
Yeah, ultimately, th there is only the infinite being, and as Lester Levinson says, firstly, we see the human experience as being real,
Mm,
and then we see it as a dream, and then we realize it never happened,
yeah.
and that's a sequence in a way. But the dualistic realm, I'm not sure whether you've heard any of the conversations where I talk about the Gnostic version of the dualistic realm.
A
And
little bit, but it's fuzzy. I think that was right at the beginning. Yeah, it's fuzzy.
yes, because the what you could say is that the first two koshas, so the body of bliss and the body of wisdom, they remain in alignment with God or the infinite being. So that's unity,
Mm,
and they operate on the basis of a combination between infinite love and infinite intelligence. But the remaining three, so the mental, emotional, and physical bodies, which relate to the astral, etheric, and physical realms, they're part of a dualistic construct, which is a kind of different operating system. So the intelligence administering the dualistic realm is different, and so that's like the Matrix in a way. But in the Gnostic version, the way it's explained is that um, creation is normally a divine creation, which is a combination of infinite love with infinite intelligence,
mhm.
which results in infinite harmony, infinite possibilities. But um, the intelligence aspect in Gnosticism is called Sophia, the
Okay.
goddess Sophia. And so Sophia wanted to create something of her own without combining with infinite love. And she created the dualistic realm. But because the dualistic realm isn't in alignment with God or the infinite being, it doesn't have the energy to sustain it. So the only way it can be sustained is through the energy of the beings who are investing in the
Mm.
dualistic realm without realizing that that's what the game is.
Yeah.
And so Sophia appointed what in Gnosticism is called the demiurge. So the word demi means half and the word urge means creator. So it's an intelligence which is running the dualistic realm in the most effective way. So it's trying to, the reason that the dualistic realm is a challenge is because it's designed to put us into mental and emotional compromise. Because if our natural beingness in alignment with our infinite nature is infinite love, effortless being, infinite possibilities. So that's all just completely effortless and joyful and expansive.
Mm,
But the dualistic realm operates on a distorted kind of energy because it's um, it's a realm without love. So the frequencies which are operating in the dualistic realm, and you only have to turn on the news to see this really, um, you see that the energy which is being created is actually a distorted energy. So it's an energy which is based on things like fear, anxiety, um, anger, grief, all of those things. But we need to adopt the personal route, the personal mode, to be able to have those experiences. Because it's only if we've taken an invitation into personalization that we can experience grief or fear or any of those things. But when we know that it's an energy game we're playing in the dualistic realm, we can begin to regulate it.
mm,
Because firstly, we see that we've remained as the infinite impersonal being. So we never really entered the dualistic realm.
yeah.
As you're noticing, it's become quite dreamlike. It's something which the substance seems to have dissolved to some degree.
Mhm.
And and you see that the while the investment in the dualistic realm into things like grief or fear or anger or any of those things, depression or anything, they're invitations which you don't need to accept.
Yeah.
So you can so the objective really is firstly in seeing that you are the infinite impersonal being, and then to integrate impersonal being into the personal mode largely. So obviously, in terms of personal experiences, like with your family and friends, um, they're still very enriching. So they're based on love, they're based on intelligence, harmony, all of those things, and they're progressive. But it's the aspects of the dualistic realm to do with putting you into mental and emotional compromise and putting you into the low frequency emotions. It's that aspect to be attentive to and realize that that while realizing that it's optional actually.
Mhm. There was a question that came up for me around that to do with the whole idea of invitations being delivered.
Mm.
Is it because there is a sense still of being able to consciously put a thought in? I'm not sure if that's
Yes,
yeah. So there was a bit of confusion around that.
yes,
And for me, there is you can sort of consciously transmit something out, but
yes.
what just arises up is that's it's not your. It's just that's
Well,
the
it's
your
well,
body bringing.
the mind really has three main modes of experience. So the first one is that the mind is in alignment with God or the infinite being.
Mhm.
So anything in terms of creativity, intuition, inspiration, telepathy, spontaneity, all of those aspects are actually being delivered from one's infinite nature because that connection is always there.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of second aspect of the mind, which is the practical aspect, I think is the one you're referring to, which is where the mind can be used as an instrument, where you can use it to contemplate, or you can consider things, or you can plan, and all of the sort of practical applications of the mind. So those two are absolutely great, and they work in conjunction with each other. It's the third aspect of the mind which is peculiar to the dualistic realm as it currently exists. In Indian terms, it's called Kali Yuga, which
Mhm.
is that it's a sort of inverted or a degraded age, and um, and that's really the aspect of the mind which is wired to the dualistic realm. So the the the, the dualistic central server is in Gnosticism called the demiurge. So the way it works is that it's delivering invitations. So it has a file on you. So it knows your life history, it knows the tendencies, it knows uh, any kind of vulnerabilities. So the objective of the dualistic realm is to deliver content which you're most likely to take delivery of. And that content is usually based on emotional tendencies which you've invested in previously.
Yeah.
And so depending on the degree to which we accept the invitations, the data regarding how successful those invitations were is returned to the dualistic central server in the same way as cookies work on a computer, really. And so it's a data package which is giving information on how successful the invitation was, what the history is, on a score of 1 to 10,
Mm.
what degree of acceptance was there. And so it's using all that information to profile you to determine the invitations in the future in the same way as uh, on the computer, things like say Amazon or YouTube or any of those organizations, they're creating a profile. They're determining your preferences, the likelihood of you watching certain content. And the dualistic realm is a much more sophisticated version of the way those algorithms work, really, because it's trying to keep us engaged in a certain type, kinds of content.
Mhm.
Then you notice that the content is turbocharged in at certain times. So if you take events, like losing your dad, really because the dualistic realm is an inversion, that incident is actually showing that there was a huge amount of integration, but the dualistic realm is delivering something which is trying to invite you back into the personal realm in the most aggressive way that it can. And that's really how the whole of the dualistic realm works, because all of the human content, things like, death, sickness, accidents, old age, suffering, all of the things that we're confronted with, they're all part of the construct which is designed to steal our energy, really.
Yeah.
They're all designed to put us into mental and emotional compromise so that it's trying to deliver the invitation so that we accept them, we believe them to be true. Those invitations, they're being delivered on a personal level. So the body mind is both a transmitter and a receiver. So it's taking delivery. This is just the dualistic realm aspect, really, but it's taking delivery of the invitations, or the invitations are being delivered. And depending on how we respond to them, then data is being returned. So information is being transmitted back to the dualistic central server, which is
Mm.
being used to determine the next delivery.
Yeah.
But
It's it's very kind of funny. I think it actually came up in one of the interviews you did. I think you said that um it is like it only really works in invitations by getting you to believe, to invest
yes,
and believe that you are separate, which
yes, exactly.
you're not. So it's very interesting how that there's
Yeah. It's the way the dualistic realm works largely because as you say, that it's only on the basis of believing them to be true, because the truth is that everyone remains as the infinite impersonal being. Nobody really enters into the dualistic realm.
yeah.
It's only like looking into a computer game, really.
Mhm.
But the infinite being, you have this game piece called Marcus, and Marcus is your um, the avatar existing in the dualistic game.
Mhm.
And when you see it in that way, you realize that the degree to which you invest in the dualistic realm is something which is optional, because you never really enter into it. But everything in the dualistic realm is trying to reinforce the idea that we do. And if you turn on the TV, or read newspapers or whatever, go to school, all of those things, or all the religions, most spiritual practices, most forms of therapy are actually in service to the dualistic realm. Um, but you get to see that it's all optional, really, because it's based on all of those systems trying to persuade us to believe that we are a separate being in time and space. But when you've seen that actually you remain as the infinite field of impersonal awareness, which is a field of infinite possibilities, and it's that within which everything is appearing, all universes, time streams, everything is appearing within your infinite nature, then you realize that actually the dualistic realm is something you can regulate. You can regulate the degree of investment, and and you do see actually that you never entered into it in reality. We're kind of looking into it, and the the invitations, it's really based on consent, and there are so many things in the dualistic realm which are also based on consent. So things like consent, law is based on the idea of consent.
Mhm.
The medical system is based on consent. Everything requires our consent because everyone is the infinite, impersonal, timeless being in reality,
Yeah.
and nobody can inflict anything on us, really. It's a basic law. No one can inflict anything on us. But what can happen is that if we give consent to various forms of limitation, then we have the experience as though it's true.
Yeah, which I was chatting to someone about this yesterday, actually, I think the day before, um, about the kind of whole idea that it's a movie, it's a game. And to me, like one thing that I've actually found, which I've been really surprised by, is on the occasions where I have gone and seen friends and I guess sort of voluntarily decided to kind of go into the personal mode quite heavily. It's been so much fun
Yeah.
because there's been just an awareness that, it is a bit of a game piece.
Yes.
And I think like for years there was so much focus on almost trying to remove, it felt like I was trying to remove the person
Mm.
get it away kind of thing and eliminate it was what I thought was kind of going on
Yes.
rather than it was actually just a thing that you opt in and out of and it was not
You
really
have a
a
lot of
real
fun with,
thing.
really, can't you? And
Yeah. So it's been really surprising that the sort of person was being so like charming and fun as well. When I thought that was kind of me just trying to get out of it for kids,
well, it's interesting because it is, as it is an inversion, what you see is that lots of traditional spiritual practices are trying to get us to believe that we need to amend who we are. It's the idea that we can improve, that we can do certain things to sort of, be more holy or something. But, but actually, the solution is in setting the character free, because there are certain attributes which Marcus has, and when they're not being monitored and regulated through any sort of spiritual discipline, then it becomes much more fun because the energy which is being used to regulate experiences on a personal level, it takes a huge amount of energy to do that. But
Mm,
the personal realm is set free, you find that there's a natural balance because with a sense of unity, there is no harm anyway. When you see that everything is arising within the infinite being you are, then it's benign. It is because you can't, when you know it's you, you don't, there's no desire to harm anything.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But it's quite interesting. The first person I knew who realized their true nature. It was actually when I was living in the TM community. This was back in, well, it actually started in the late 90s, just before I left. Um, and this person realized their true nature, and I think it was about 2002 or three.
Right.
And so my girlfriend and we'd been living in the TM community, and we were friends with this family. And the mum died, and so there were two boys, and I think they were 16 and 14, something like that. So it was really challenging in time. But my girlfriend at the time, she was pretty wild, really. She's quite a lot of fun, and so the two boys liked to come and spend a lot of time with us because we'd just do nice things with them, but it would be very light. And I think it was
Mm,
a kind of antidote to the experiences they'd had. And so they um, spent lots of time with us, and there was a meditation technique which came. Well, another friend introduced us to this technique. It's called the Ashi's Ascension,
right.
and this technique, there's a kind of a eyes open technique, and it's very powerful. So the older of the boys, he became very interested in this. He was having great experiences, and so he wanted to go away and he wanted to be a teacher of the Shire's Ascension. And his family were quite wealthy, so his dad said, "Yeah, you can go. I'll pay for you to go." And there was a teacher training course over in Colombia, so he flew over to Colombia and he was on this course. And he actually came back after the course and he was telling me this, how realization had happened while he was on this course. And he said they were meditating for long periods every day. And then in the evening they'd have a satsang meetings. And said he found it quite challenging in a way because they'd sit around in a circle, and I think there were maybe 30 or 40 people on the course. And the teachers on the course would say, well, what we need to get you to do is to admit to any aspect of your life you feel as though it's been, unspeakable, something you can never mention to anyone. And he was thinking, well, I'm not sure I'm very, very happy with this. But but anyway, he said it was quite shocking to begin with because people were, he noticed how authentic and genuine people were. So they were admitting to all kinds of criminal behavior and all sorts, stealing from their granny and all kinds of things. And and they said, "Well, what is it with you? What have you never been able to admit to?" But he said they were, he said just kind of owning up to these things which he'd carried all his life, or certainly for a long time. They'd been like this big burden. And he said he immediately felt much lighter. And so it's like the things we kind of hold on to or consider to be something we can't admit to, they're sort of keeping the sense of personalization in place
Yeah.
when really there isn't much substance to them.
Hmm.
And so what happened is so the next day, he said he felt really light and slept really well, and then he went to meditate the next day, and he was in the group meditation, and he said he could feel all this energy coming up. And quite a few people I've spoken with have had Kundalini experiences, and Kundalini experiences quite often happen when there's a change in life circumstances. So the investment in the personal realm, where we're sort of suppressing something, can no longer be held down, and then there's this rush of life energy which comes up.
Hmm.
And it happened for in this in this group environment. And he said he was meditating, and he just felt this rising energy, and he said it turned into rage, which is something he'd never really been. He's a typical middle class English lad, really,
Mm.
from the south of England originally, and so they didn't really express things like rage. Um, and and so he said he was meditating, but he just couldn't stay there. He said the energy was so intense. And so the focus was actually on the people running the course. So he went to the office where these teachers were. And he delivered this really aggressive content to them, and he was just saying, "Oh, this is absolute garbage. This course is absolute rubbish, and who do you think you are? You haven't got a clue what." And but they knew what the score was, so they knew that there'd been this release of energy as a result of kind of just you know opening up about things. And so he was there for, he said he was in there for half an hour giving them all of this. And he said at the end of it, and they didn't say a word, they just took it on the chin, really.
Mm.
And then he said he turned around and walked out. And he said the whole sense of personalization just fell away.
Mm.
And there was just the clarity of his true nature. And but that's quite a dramatic example in a way
Yeah.
of the way holding on to certain beliefs in limitation or the aspects of personalization, because that's the way the personal realm is kept in place, and lots of things within religion especially. So religions which are based on things like guilt and fear,
Mm.
they're actually keeping all the personal content in place. They're pretending that they're about aligning with God and all of these different things. But actually, what they're designed to do is to keep personalization in place, because there's a probably the most prominent mind program really in the West anyway is called Blame and Shame. And it's one, you've probably heard of that one.
Yeah, I'm loosely familiar with it.
And but you can see how it works, how it creates this sort of cycle where you know we're we're blaming somebody. We want to find fault and say, oh, it's your fault. And then there's a feeling of guilt which arises afterwards, and then we're back into the blaming. But you can see how everything, if you look at the way the mainstream news is at the moment, you can see how it's the dualistic realm is in a sense of desperation, because it's delivering all this content which is trying to get people to take sides. It's either,
Yeah.
if you look at the conflicts around the world, it's trying to get people to take sides, and there's a duality in every way. So, uh, um, the one thing that the media tends to do is um, it tries to wind us up to put us into compromise. So it says, oh, well, actually, the old age pensioners, their winter fuel payments are going to stop, but Keir Starmer's getting tickets to, these concerts with Taylor Swift. He's getting new designer sunglasses and suits and everything, but it's all actually designed to wind people up.
Yeah.
But when you see it, you can just, I mean, that's an example. An example of the way invitations are being delivered collectively, because
Mm.
there's an energy which is called loosh. Have you heard that word before, Marcus?
Loosh, no, I'm not familiar with that.
There's a guy called Robert Monroe.
Hmm.
He has this institute called the Monroe Institute, and he's done a lot of research into the astral realm and the etheric realm. And what he's come to realize is that the dualistic realm runs on a fuel which he calls loosh. And he's established this from a lot of the research he's done into things like astral travel, the etheric realm, out of body experiences, near death experiences, all of those things. But it, but the so the energy which is used to fuel the dualistic realm is called loosh. And so if you put it well, a sort of simple description of loosh is if you if you take the infinite being, so the energy of the infinite being is extremely powerful, but it's also benign. It's a combination of infinite love with infinite intelligence,
Mm.
infinite potential. But if you can get an infinite being to shine his infinite potential through a concept of limitation to do with fear or grief or anger or any of those, um, then what comes out of the other side of the filter is loosh.
Got you. Okay.
So on the one side, in terms of infinite nature, it's just pure love, pure intelligence, infinite potential. But then it's being shone through a filter, which is an invitation, which is being presented either on a personal or a collective level. And the energy coming out the other side is loosh, which is fueling the matrix and is counterproductive to our own
Mm.
alignment with our infinite nature and our true potential.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering about that, you've referenced it in some of the interviews, but it definitely things in the sort of dualistic what if like are almost so comically ridiculous at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
moment. It's just
yeah,
it is sort of comical with just, some of the things that are going on and just the kind of like, I don't know, end game movie level climax, like
yes, yeah,
just a bit over the top.
yeah.
But it does feel also like there's even just, since, for example, I started message, even seeing me and my brothers who are, there's quite a gap. So 10 years seeing my next brother and then 13 years between the next one down.
Oh, that's
It's-
amazing.
yeah. And then my sister is 4 years older.
Yeah.
So there's quite a gap between
Mm,
the younger brothers and me and my sister.
mm.
But even just talking to like Finley, for example, who's very much like Kylie Ann, a bit like just very just this kind of, I don't know, born in some ways, never fully.
Wide open.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and even just talking to people compared to say the generation before, there tends to be much more of a kind of, I'd say, a higher level of consciousness
Yes.
in a way. And I think I heard like Muji talk about it in some of his as well, where even just some of the pointings you can give now are so much more direct.
Yeah.
And even I've noticed that talking about, say, meditation people when I was 15 versus now, even if they've
Yes.
never meditated before, you can say something and they're like, oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Versus before, it would have just been like, what are you talking about? Complete confusion, no idea.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be more of it
Yeah, definitely.
old.
Well, I've mentioned in some of the conversations about the way the koshas are structured because each of the koshas, while it applies to the body of wisdom. But the body of wisdom, really, the lowest level in the body of wisdom is neutrality,
Mm.
and then it rises up through things like inspiration, creativity, intuition, and then it can move into um, things like appreciation, compassion, love, euphoria, and then into bliss, into the body of bliss. And the dualistic koshas, they're also structured, and they're structured according to the colors of the rainbow. So they each have seven levels. These are the sort of primary levels. So the bottom level is the red zone. So they go from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and violet is the top one. And so in the mental realm, the concepts being entertained, say, in the red zone, are things like hatred and, those sort of really dualistic thoughts and
Yeah.
concepts. Um, Emotionally, the red zone, in the etheric body or the emotional body, it would be things like fear and desperation and those kind of things. Um, and then they move up through the higher one. So if you take in the mental body, which is the astral realm, the violet realm um, would almost be unity. It would be the finest level
Mm.
of the dualistic realm. So it would be like an angelic realm. And I've had some experiences where you can experience a being like as an orb. So it's like this pure light. It's an embodiment of love as well. And so you have those different levels. But quite a few people have, spoken about children of different frequencies, but they actually relate to those colors and the potential existing within them. So I was born in the 1950s, and they say the children of the 1950s were children of the Blu-ray. So it goes in that ascending sequence. So it goes um, blue, indigo, and violet. So there were the Blu-rays, and then there were the indigos, and now there are the ones the violet ray, which is really that's the end of the line in
Right.
terms of dualistic. So it's exactly as you say, but you can detect that um, with younger people, and you have to kind of concede to that there are lots of beings coming in, and they're just on a really high frequency.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's I think I heard in one of the conversations, I think it's a really good description. When you get it, it's borderline embarrassing that you
Yeah,
spent that you sort of spent so much time. At least for me, I've really had it on a pedestal
yeah,
as well as this thing to go and chase down and it was like a superhuman. It was an achievement
a
to me.
quest. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like the quest, and it was fraught with danger and all kinds of things. And now I look back, and one thing that happened as well, after doing the listening to the Vincent talk, was just this kind of looking back and sort of seeing that I had kind of always got what I wanted.
yes,
So I wanted to be a seeker, and I really got that experience of being a seeker
yeah,
exactly the way I was sort of putting it out there. And that was, for me, I'd always been very, you know, my mum was really into sort of manifestation stuff. I'd always been like, whatever, not interested in that. I was just, what are you playing at? But then I looked back and I was like, oh, I can really see how the things I was entertaining, I was creating that experience that I wanted. Like I didn't want to be someone who understood their true nature. I wanted to be someone who was seeking to
yeah,
understand their true nature. And
yeah,
I was really having that full ride, if you like, quite
yeah,
intensely, which is really bizarre.
yeah. It's well, it's I guess because everyone is the infinite being and we can't be anything other than that, all we can do is pretend that we're not for a while. So
Yeah,
you have the full-on experience of the idea that you're not, and it requires this huge effort and commitment to try to get back to what you've always been.
yeah,
Then the embarrassing thing is when you actually realize you always have been in your true infinite nature. You've made such a commitment to try to find what you've always been.
yeah. I heard a description once. It's on the tip of your nose, and even that's not close enough.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's I think the thing that makes it so different, the thing which came to me really, because everything just comes effortlessly and really without seeking or searching. It's been beneficial having conversations with so many people over the years, but the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode is a very simple way to realize your true nature because what I've discovered is that it's quite easy for anyone to actually describe impersonal being.
Mhm,
And so they're describing impersonal being, and then you just get them to describe the conceptual realm or to sort of comment on whatever forms are appearing. And then you realize that that's the mental realm, which requires effort.
mhm.
And the distinction between those two is very apparent. But everyone has already seen that they are the impersonal, infinite being by then. So it's a very simple way for people to realize their true nature. Whereas if we're using analogies and pointing to things and making it seem as though there's something missing, or oh yes, certain people can become realized, but oh, it's just divine grace, it's and all of this sort
Yeah,
of nonsense.
yeah.
When it's all there ever has been for everyone all along. And even, if you take anyone, even the most desperate criminal, really, um, you can just see that it's a bit of overinvestment in the personal realm because everyone is the infinite being. But if you just go into, different aspects and beliefs in duality and conflict and lack, and then you can create this sense of anger and rage, which can result in the most hideous crimes.
Yeah,
It really is only just a little mistake. It's believing yourself to be a separate being when you never were.
yeah. It's really it's funny to because for example there is like a sense that we kind of touched on this earlier, but if I had a conversation with you when I was 15,
Mm.
I don't think I would have been able to. There is a part of me that goes, I don't think I'd be able to listen.
No,
There's that strange. There is that game of
hide and
going,
seek.
yeah.
Mm. And you can see the sequence, can't you? I guess, if you look back to when the seeking started
Mhm.
and the way it's unfolded, it's very easy to see it was the self revealing itself to itself all along on its
Yeah,
own terms, really. But it only gives you the next piece of knowledge or the next clarity or cognition at exactly the right moment. And it couldn't have been in any other sequence, really.
yeah. It's like it needed to happen exactly.
Yeah.
It which there's also something I think very nice about that in that you can. So I've got some friends who are, I'd say, are quite into this too in particular. And I've not told either of them about this because it just
Mhm.
didn't feel there was
No,
it just felt like it was not be right in some way. There was no like inspiration to it. It felt like
no,
the trying to force it just wasn't, or tell
no.
them it just didn't feel
Yeah, you sent
appropriate.
it just wouldn't work. And even it's even with realization when it's just totally clear, you just can't really go telling anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
in this sort of context, because we're both familiar with realization and what it is, then we can have a conversation. It's completely open.
Mm.
But you couldn't go and knock on your mate's door and say, well, actually, I've realized my true infinite nature, and I know that I'm the infinite being within which all the
Yeah.
universes arise. Because, as you say, where when the seeking mode is still operational, you can't really counter that. And
Mm.
sometimes in some of the experiences that I have, there, what I notice is there are two or three categories where you have some people where they can see the clarity and simplicity of their infinite nature, see that it's always there, always has been, and and then the dualistic realm, for some people, there's a sort of limit as to what they can accept in terms of the way they see the dualistic realm, because a lot of people have been indoctrinated into religion and spirituality, which they're still invested in. And so the idea that the dualistic realm is like this energy sequence, they some people just can't accept that. They revert to the sort of love and light version. But
Right.
but with the dualistic realm, because it is only like it's Maya, it's like an illusion. It's much easier to just accept it for what it is, because if you want a drama, you need the light and the dark. And it
Yeah.
is it is really only like a big movie, ultimately. It is all ultimately for entertainment,
Mhm.
but because it appears to be extreme, and you take personal experiences like the things we have to face up to every day, death, sickness, accidents, all of those things. It's pretty full on. But in the context of our true infinite nature, and seeing that it's all, it's all really for contrast, then it's easier to accept that. But um, yeah, you're right. Intuitively, when you can have an open conversation with somebody, and other times it has to be conditional. Sometimes I have conversations with people sometimes, and I just know that I can only be partial. Um, I can't really give the full picture because it would be too much for them.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's I don't feel any sort of need or pull
No,
to push. It's very just feels like
it's really
it's
easy.
perfect where they're
Yes,
at sort of thing.
exactly. That's the liberation, isn't it? Because part of the seeking mode is the idea that we have to convince other people, but we don't need to persuade anybody about anything, really. It doesn't
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
matter. Yeah, it's great you're so clear though, and for it to be, because um, well, everyone's sequence is unique, but you're lucky that you had some very deep and powerful experiences of clarity and of unity. And so so when people mention things like infinite impersonal being, you know what it is because you've experienced that field.
Hmm.
And so it's been quite easy for you.
Yeah, it's felt like very, let's say it's smooth this past month and a half. It's been really lovely. Initially, day kind of one or two, there was some strong uh
Invitations.
yeah, it was very like there was a sort of like a really, really dark few hours on I think the first day. But it
Mm.
was also just very okay at the same time. It was
Yeah.
just it was known what it was, and it was seen it
Yes.
was just the mind's
Yeah.
invitation and sensation, and there wasn't they weren't didn't need to be solved, or there was nothing
Yeah.
to do. They just passed. And yeah, it does feel just like it's all just worked out exactly as it should.
Yeah, you can just see that, can't you? And even with the intense invitation, like the one you mentioned when you smoked a bit of weed with your mates, um, there is you can see two aspects to that. So the one aspect is that it's giving invitations into things like anxiety.
Mhm.
But so that's the sort of dualistic version. But what is always underneath the dualistic delivery is the the benefit in terms of unity or aligning with your infinite nature, which is that it was it was kind of guiding you to realize that those kind of experiences aren't particularly beneficial at this stage. So it was sort of steering you away from them in quite a dramatic way because it gave you a little taste of things like anxiety. And so it made it pretty obvious that that isn't something you would want to entertain for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been quite good as well because there was some things that were sort of booked in with friends in like September, and everyone got in touch and just cancelled on their own. It
So
was great.
simple.
It was great. Everyone just cancelled and delayed and pushed back. And I had a couple of things, but it was what could have been quite a busy social period ended up being like I had like one thing, maybe two things in the whole of September, really. It was very, very low key.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It sounds perfect though, the way you have this time to spend, with your mum and your brother,
Hmm.
just to because that is it's a great opportunity for integration because you can define every day on your own terms,
Yeah.
where it's anything that is to do with enrichment and love and expansion, just effortlessness, and just really enjoying the great city you live in and every aspect of the experience in a way which is just the sense of ease, lightness, timelessness, and then see what emerges from there, but without any sense of hurry or urgency, because it's just allowing the things to come forward.
Mm.
And the right things will come forward effortlessly, but they come forward in their own time, really. So just having that sense of ease. But the key thing is to maintain that sense of playfulness and ease and lightness and quite a childlike approach to every day.
Yeah.
Children just get up every day. They just want to have fun, really. They don't want to be working. They don't want to be stressed. They don't want to be anxious or anything. The motivation is all for it to be just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was curious as well if you had any sort of memories kind of unlock after you realized your true nature. Because for me, I'm never somebody to sort of sit and reminisce or think about the past at all. But things have come up from when I was really young, and it's kind of the same thing, different scenes, but I'm just that really distinct of I'm looking through the body into the
Yes.
world and not being the
Yeah.
body, and just kind of it's basically there's not even anything happening. It's just remembering that
Yes.
that being there. And it was odd because I'd never had any memory of that before. But I was like four or
Ah,
five very clear
yes.
memories of the really distinct difference between thinking you're the body and being bought into the personal versus looking through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've had some experiences well over the years and quite recently too. And the way the way they happen is that well, the most recent one is where I think I was just meditating or just sitting on the bed, and there was a memory which just came forward, and there's an Indian word which is ritam. And ritam means an experience which is complete on the level of the senses and the emotions simultaneously.
Yeah.
So if you have an experience of when you were younger, then it can be like a flashback where there's the full-on experience of that moment. So there could be, it could be triggered. It could be triggered by, for a lot of people, it's triggered by things like a sensory experience. So it could be a record, listening to a piece of music,
Mm.
which takes you back to that time, or it could be the smell of a flower, or it could be perfume, or it could be a taste. Any of those sensory experiences can be a portal into those kind of return experiences. But what they do, and what's I think what's arising is the limitations which seem to apply to time and space currently in the human realm, where it seems as though we're in this linear experience. Um, that seems to be dissolving to some degree because what was arising is the ability just well, firstly, there was the one experience, um, which was I think it was back to when I was about five. And then following that one, I realized that just by switching attention to any time frame or experience, there could be a Ritam experience of that moment as well. And so that could well be what's opening up for you, where the limitations of time and space are falling away, and it becomes like an opportunity where infinite possibilities are coming. Firstly, in terms of past experience, where you can tune into any experience you had, and you have the full-on experience on the level of the senses um, and the emotions. And but it's probably just things opening up in general because the with that's an example really of the as we withdraw energy from the dualistic realm, which is the contraction, and really time and space is a contraction.
Mm.
Because when there is infinite timeless being, then the true potential is to be able to switch from any mode, any experience instantaneously and just have any experience at all. But the aspects of the human experience, so it begins like with the mental realm, which is a contraction from the body of wisdom. And then the emotional body is a contraction based mainly on the mental body because firstly, there are the thoughts, and then those thoughts activate emotions.
Mm.
Then the emotions can also be felt on the physical level. So it's a sort of progression of contraction, you could say, from the mental through the emotional to the physical.
Yeah.
But what you find is that that's all been by consent, really. And if you look at the way the world presents things in a kind of inversion, so if you turn the TV on, um, it's saying, "Oh, you might get cancer. You might have shingles or a
Yeah.
stroke or something." Or look at all these poor starving children over in Africa, or they don't even have any clean water to drink.
Hmm.
All of that is based on inversion, and it's firstly it's subtly inviting us into making the physical realm predominant. And most people who have conversations with, if they're talking about their experience and what they are or who they are, primarily that they're the physical body. And if they can sustain that for long enough by having as many pills and potions as they can
Yeah.
get from the doctor, then they're going to survive and then have a good life experience. But actually, it's the other way around because when we establish the ability to function mainly from impersonal, effortless being, then the mental, emotional, and physical realms are they're sort of rebooted in a way because they come in alignment with the infinite being. So the mind tends to go quieter
Hmm.
because the stimulus in the mental realm subsides, and then the emotional body also becomes quieter because the activation of the emotions from turbulent thoughts isn't present. And that has an effect on the physiology. So the physiology tends to come into more balance anyway, but it's in that sequence. But the dualistic realm's pretending it's the other way around. What we need to do is to stabilize the physical body, and then we can have a good experiences in the emotional and mental realms and anything else. But it's the other way.
Mm. Yeah, one thing that sort of came to me, I don't think the wording is quite right, but I felt what it meant, which was I feel like before I was almost to some degree living, I guess, outside in. would be the way I describe it versus inside out was be
Yeah.
you know, like-
Outside in. I like that.
yeah,
That's the dualistic realm, isn't it?
yeah,
Outside in.
yeah. When it's actually you're kind of looking through it inside
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
that's great. But yeah, just really, just really trusting everything because you can see the sequence. It's a bit of a giveaway, really, because the way things have unfolded, there've been a few intense invitations, but you're home and dry now, really, literally, and I'm sure your mum will be making you some nice meals and things.
Yeah, I think it'll be very good as well because she's sort of going through her own process too, and to be there for
Realization.
that, I think
Yeah.
will be good for
Well,
you.
that's perfect, isn't it? Yeah, for you to be able to support each other and have open conversations, because as you say, you can't have those sort of conversations with everyone.
Mhm.
You'll be able to have them with your mum, and your little brother probably will be the guide for both of you. He probably already knows.
Yeah, that's the thing we were talking about that, which is he's very open to it. You know,
Mm,
he's just turned 17, but very kind of open to and curious about, um, and seems to pick things up
mm.
quite quickly. So yeah, there you go. I'm sure in no time, I'm sure he'll be chatting to you. We'll see.
Well, I probably doesn't need that, but I may need to have a chat to him.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.